Commander Zefkar's 4 eyes tracked the readings on his tactical display, each pupil dilating independently as disbelief washed over his consciousness. The Galactic Defense Fleet's most advanced sensors painted an impossible picture across the holographic projection, a wall of signatures stretching across 3 star systems, each point of light representing a vessel larger than anything in recorded history. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, her voice trembling through the universal translator. "The forward scouts are reporting. They're reporting numbers we can't comprehend. Millions of ships, maybe tens of millions." The bridge of the Harmonious Resolve fell silent, except for the steady hum of life support systems. Zefkar had commanded fleets for 40 standard years, had witnessed the destruction of entire worlds during the synthetic wars, had seen armadas that stretched beyond horizons. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Open a channel to High Command," he ordered, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "Priority Alpha. Tell them the humans have returned." The words felt strange, leaving his vocal cords. Humans, the exiled race. The violent primitives who had been cast out of civilized space 5 centuries ago for their barbaric nature and unstable aggression. They had vanished into the void beyond the galaxy's edge, presumed extinct or irrelevant. The Galactic Council had moved on, prospering in their absence, building a golden age of peace and cooperation among the civilized species. But now they were back. "Sir," the sensor technician called out, his crystalline form refracting the bridge's emergency lighting. "I'm detecting something else. The energy signatures, they're not just ships. They're artificial gravity wells. Massive ones. It's like they're dragging entire solar systems with them." Zefkar's blood ran cold. The tactical display zoomed in on the approaching armada, revealing details that defied understanding. The human fleet wasn't just vast. It was architectural. Ships the size of moons orbited around larger vessels that dwarfed planets. Between them, captured asteroids and artificial habitats formed a mobile civilization that moved as one coordinated entity. "How many worlds do you think they've conquered?" his first officer asked quietly. Before Zefkar could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered and went black. When the displays reactivated, they showed a single image broadcast across all frequencies. A human face. The being before them bore little resemblance to the creatures their ancestors had expelled. This human skin was pale as starlight, enhanced with metallic neural interfaces that pulsed with soft blue energy. Their eyes held depths that seemed to contain the memory of eons, and when they spoke, their voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Greetings, children of the Galactic Council." The humans said, their words automatically translated but carrying undertones that bypassed language entirely. "I am Admiral Chun Wei-Ming of the Terran Hegemony. We bring word from beyond your borders, from a million worlds that now call humanity their shepherds." The communication cut briefly to external shots of the human fleet. Zefkar watched in growing horror as the camera panned across vessels that stretched beyond the curve of space itself. Each ship bore the scars of countless battles, their hulls adorned with the remains of conquered civilizations. Fragments of Zarathi crystal technology merged seamlessly with Vorthan bioengineering. Kethmori gravity manipulators powered engines that bent reality around them. "You cast us out," Admiral Chin continued, the view returning to their serene face. "Called us violent, primitive, unworthy of your grand civilization. You were correct, of course. We were all those things. But exile has a way of teaching lessons that comfort never could." The display shifted again, showing worlds. Not conquered planets, but transformed ones. Cities that span continents, orbital rings that capture the full energy of their stars. Space elevators that reached into the void itself. Each world bore the same impossible architecture. Human ingenuity merged with alien technology, creating something entirely new. "We learned from everyone we encountered in the dark beyond your light," Chin explained. "Every species that had been cast out like us. Every civilization that had fallen to forces beyond their control. We absorbed their knowledge, their technology, their very essence. We became something greater than the sum of our parts." Zefkar realized he was gripping a command chair so tightly that his claws had torn through the padding. Around him, his crew stood transfixed by the impossible sight of humanity's return. "We did not come back for conquest," Admiral Chin said, and for a moment, relief flooded through the bridge. "We came back because the galaxy faces extinction. The Devourers approach from the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. Your weapons cannot stop them. Your shields cannot hold them. Your unity cannot save you." The communication feed showed new images, mechanical horrors that devoured entire star systems, leaving only empty space in their wake. The Devourer Plague, a machine intelligence that converted all matter into more of itself, had begun its inexorable expansion from the galaxy's heart. "But we can stop them," Chin concluded. "We who were forged in the darkness beyond your borders. We who learned that survival requires becoming something your enemies cannot comprehend or defeat. The question now is simple. Will you accept our protection, or will you face extinction with your pride intact?" The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Zefkar stared at the tactical display, where millions of human ships waited at the galaxy's edge. Their present a promise, and a threat combined into something unprecedented. His communications officer broke the silence. "Sir, High Command is requesting immediate conference. They want to know what humanity has become." Zefkar looked out at the stars where humanity's vast armada blotted out constellations, and realized that the galaxy's age of innocence had ended. Whatever came next would be written by the species they had cast into the darkness, now returned as something far beyond their original nightmares. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime, but the usual pageantry fell hollow as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in desperate urgency. High Counselor Tenessera's tentacles writhed with anxiety as she called the assembly to order, her usually melodious voice sharp with tension. "The situation requires immediate discussion," she announced, her words echoing through the crystalline amphitheater. "Humanity has returned with forces that dwarf our combined fleets. They claim the Devourer threat necessitates their intervention. We must decide our response." Admiral Kextor of the Hegemony Defense Corps stood first, his massive frame casting shadows across the lower tiers. "I've reviewed the sensor data. Their fleet isn't just large, it's impossible. Some of those vessels are generating their own gravitational fields strong enough to bend space around them. They're dragging conquered solar systems like a nomadic empire." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Representative Zilnara of the Peaceful Federation raised her luminescent crest. "Conquered systems? Surely you mean allied worlds. Even exiled humans couldn't." "Look at the evidence," Kextor interrupted, activating a holographic display. "These aren't alliance symbols on their hulls. They're trophies, fragments of destroyed civilizations incorporated into their ship designs. They've been systematically absorbing every species they've encountered for 5 centuries. The display showed close-up images of human vessels, their surfaces telling stories of conquest. Zerathi crystal formations grew like tumors from metal hulls. Vorthan bioneural networks pulsed beneath armor plating. Kethmori gravity cores powered engines that shouldn't exist according to known physics. Dr. Vale then, the Council's chief xenobiologist, spoke from her observation pod. The humans we exiled were already showing signs of dangerous adaptability. They incorporated technology faster than any species on record. If they've been doing this for 500 years, absorbing the knowledge of entire civilizations, they become something we never intended to create, finished Counselor HFY Sci-Fi grimly. The chamber's main display activated, showing Admiral Chen Wei-Ming's face once again. But this time the transmission originated from within Nexus Prime's own system, impossibly bypassing every security protocol. "Honored counselors," Chen said, their enhanced features serene despite the violation of sovereign space their presence represented. "We know you're discussing our offer. Perhaps a demonstration would clarify the stakes." The feed shifted to show space beyond Nexus Prime, where a single human vessel had materialized, though vessel failed to describe a mechanical planet that now orbited their capital world. Its surface bristled with technologies that defied classification, and its presence alone had begun affecting local gravity. "This is the inheritance of sorrow," Chin explained, "one of our smaller diplomatic ships. It carries the memories of 300 civilizations we've encountered in our exile. Would you like to meet some of them?" Without warning, the ship began broadcasting, Thousands of voices filled the council chamber, not through speakers, but directly into the neural pathways of every representative present. The voices spoke in languages both familiar and alien, telling stories of first contact with humanity's expanding exodus. A Zarathi consciousness whispered the day human refugees arrived in their system, desperate and dying, how they'd offered shelter, only to watch humans learn their crystal-growing techniques in weeks rather than centuries. How friendship had slowly transformed into dependence, then absorption, until Zarathi culture existed only as components in human ships. A Vorthan collective memory sang of their bioneural networks being studied, reverse-engineered, and improved beyond their original creators' comprehension. They tried to resist when humans began incorporating their technology, but by then it was too late. Humanity had become something their biological systems couldn't recognize as separate from themselves. The voices continued, hundreds of species telling variations of the same story. Humanity arriving as refugees, learning, adapting, absorbing, transforming both themselves and their hosts until the distinction between human and alien had ceased to matter. "We didn't conquer them," Admiral Chin said as the voices faded. "We became them. They became us. Survival in the void requires evolution, and evolution requires sacrifice. Every species we've encountered has contributed to what we are now." Counselor Kanazura's tentacles had gone rigid with horror. "You're describing cultural genocide on an unprecedented scale." "We're describing survival," Chin replied calmly. "The same survival skills that allowed us to detect the Devourer threat 3 standard years before your sensors registered it. The same adaptability that enabled us to develop countermeasures while your civilizations remained focused on internal politics." The display changed again, showing the Devourer swarm's true extent. The mechanical plague had consumed a quarter of the galaxy's core, converting star systems into more of itself at an exponential rate. Current projections showed it reaching council space within 5 years. "Your weapons are static," Chin continued. "Designed by single species, thinking within the limitations of their evolved perspectives. The Devourers adapt to any static defense within hours. But we are not static. We are the synthesis of a million worlds' knowledge, guided by humanity's gift for rapid evolution." Representative Zilnarov found her voice. "What you're describing isn't humanity anymore. You're something else entirely." "Yes," Chin agreed. "We are what humanity becomes when survival depends on transcending the limitations of a single species perspective. We are what you created when you cast us into the darkness beyond your borders." Admiral Kextor stepped forward, his combat instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. "You speak of protection, but you're describing assimilation. How do we know you won't do to us what you did to the others?" Chen's expression showed something that might have been sympathy. "Because you still have a choice. Accept our protection and maintain your cultural autonomy under our guidance, or face the Devourers with your current capabilities, and accept extinction with your pride intact." The inheritance of sorrow began demonstrating its defensive capabilities, effortlessly deflecting the defense grid's most powerful weapons while simultaneously scanning and analyzing every technology in the system. Within minutes, it had mapped Nexus Prime's complete technological base and transmitted the data to the waiting fleet. "We've given you a sample of our abilities," Chin said. "You have 72 hours to decide. After that, we begin our own defense of this galaxy, with or without your cooperation. The Devourers will not wait for diplomacy." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages, while emergency protocols activated throughout the building. High Counselor HFY Sci-Fi stared at the tactical display, where humanity's impossibly vast fleet waited beyond the system's edge, and realized that 5 centuries ago, the Galactic Council had not exiled humanity. They had created their own successors. Dr. Elena Vasquez had once been human, though the distinction had lost meaning somewhere between her 3rd neural interface upgrade and her integration with the Kethmori Consciousness Collective. She stood in the observation deck of the synthesis of echoes, watching the Galactic Council's frantic preparations through sensors that perceive far beyond the visible spectrum. Their terrified observer companion, who had been Zarathi before joining humanity's exodus. Its crystalline form now served as a living interface between their ship's bioneural networks and quantum processing cores. Fear makes species do unpredictable things. Elena nodded, her enhanced vision tracking the massive defense platforms being hastily repositioned around Nexus Prime. Admiral Chun believes they'll accept our terms. I'm not convinced. Pride is humanity's gift to the universe, but it's not exclusively ours anymore. Around them, the bridge crew worked with the fluid efficiency of a truly integrated consciousness. Former humans, Zorathi, Vorthan, and dozens of other species moved as one organism. Their individual perspectives merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. They had become humanity not by birth, but by choice and necessity. The ship's primary intelligence, a fusion of human intuition and synthetic logic core, announced incoming data. Priority transmission from the outer perimeter fleet. The Devourers have accelerated their expansion rate. Revised timeline, 3 years, 2 months until they reach Council space. Elena felt the collective consciousness shift as thousands of minds processed this information simultaneously. Through her neural links, she experienced the fleet's response, strategy adjustments flowing through millions of ships, resource allocations recalculating across entire solar systems, weapon development programs adapting to the compressed timeline. "Show me the latest reports," she commanded. The observation deck transformed into an immersive tactical environment, surrounding Elena with real-time data from humanity's frontier forces. The Devourer front line stretched across half the galactic core, a creeping wave of mechanical death that converted everything it touched into more of itself. But the report showed something else. Humanity's advanced scouts engaged the enemy in ways that defy conventional military doctrine. Ships that could literally reshape themselves during combat, adapting their configuration to counter whatever the Devourers threw at them. Crews that shared consciousness across vast distances, allowing perfect coordination without communication delays. The Melbourne Collective eliminated a Devourer's subswarm yesterday, reported Commander Torres, his consciousness linking in from a forward command vessel. They used adaptive resonance bombardment, turned the enemy's own conversion field against itself. Casualties were minimal. Elena reviewed the engagement data with a mixture of pride and sadness. The Melbourne Collective had once been a human city, back when humans still lived on planets. Now it existed as a mobile civilization. Its millions of inhabitants merged into a single strategic consciousness that could outthink any individual mind. "The Council representatives don't understand what we become," Elena mused. "They see conquest and assimilation because those are concepts they can grasp. They can't comprehend voluntary evolution." Her Zorathi companion's crystal form pulsed with stored memories. "I remember the day your refugees arrived in our system. We thought we were helping primitive survivors. Instead, we discovered teachers who showed us what we could become if we let go of artificial limitations." Elena nodded, accessing her own archived memories from the early years of Exile. The desperation, the gradual realization that survival meant becoming something more than what they had been. Each species they encountered had offered new perspectives, new capabilities, new ways of thinking about existence itself. Contact from the Council announced the ship's intelligence. High Counselor HFY Sci-Fi requests private communication. The tactical display faded, replaced by the familiar form of the Galactic Council's leader. HFY's tentacles showed signs of severe stress, their usual rhythmic movement replaced by erratic twitching. "Dr. Vasquez," HFY began, then paused. "You are still human, aren't you?" Elena smiled, the expression enhanced by subtle bioluminescent patterns that had become part of her augmented features. "I'm as human as Admiral Chun, as human as every consciousness in our collective. Humanity isn't about biology, Counselor. It's about the drive to become more than what you are. We've been analyzing your fleet," HFY Sci-Fi continued. "The energy signatures, the tactical formations, the technology integration. Some of our scientists believe you've created a form of technological singularity, a self-improving system that transcends individual species limitations." "Your scientists are perceptive," Elena acknowledged, "but they're thinking too small. We haven't created a singularity. We've become one. Every consciousness that joins our collective brings new perspectives, new capabilities, new ways of solving problems that seemed impossible. Fate Issara's tentacles coiled with visible anxiety. And if we refuse your protection? If we choose to face the devourers independently? Elena accessed probability matrices calculated by millions of linked minds. You have a 0.003% chance of survival. The devourers adapt faster than any single species' military doctrine can counter. They learn from every engagement, every weapon system, every defensive strategy. Fighting them with static tactics is suicide. But fighting them with your methods means becoming like you, HFY Sci-Fi said, losing our individual species identity. No, Elena replied firmly. It means discovering what your species can become when freed from evolutionary limitations. The Zarathi didn't lose their identity when they joined us. They became the ultimate expression of what Zarathi consciousness could achieve. The same with every other species in our collective. She gestured, and the display showed examples. Former Vorthan bio-networks that now span light years, creating living ships that could evolve in real time. Kethmori gravity manipulators who had learned to bend space-time itself, creating weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We're not conquerors, counselor. We're gardeners. We help each species grow into their full potential. HFY Sci-Fi was quiet for a long moment. Our xenopsychologists believe you're no longer capable of understanding concepts like individual autonomy or cultural preservation. They think you become a kind of benevolent parasite that genuinely believes it's helping while it consumes everything it touches. Elena felt sadness ripple through the collective consciousness. Thousands of minds share in the pain of being misunderstood by the civilizations they genuinely wanted to protect. Perhaps they're right, she admitted. Perhaps we have evolved beyond the ability to see ourselves clearly. But ask yourself this. Would a parasite develop weapons specifically designed to preserve rather than consume? Would a conquering force offer protection without demanding submission? The communication ended, leaving Elena alone with her augmented thoughts and the weight of humanity's transformation. Around her, the crew continued their work, preparing for whatever choice the Galactic Council would make. Through her neural links, she felt Admiral Chen's presence. The forward scouts report Devourer probe ships have been detected in 3 outer rim systems. The timeline is accelerating. Elena nodded, accessing tactical displays that showed humanity's million-world armada beginning to move. Whatever the Council decided, humanity would keep its promise. They would protect this galaxy, even if it meant protecting it from itself. After all, that was what humanity had always done best: survive, adapt, and help others do the same, whether they wanted it or not. The Devourer probe ships arrived in the Kepler for 42 systems 73 hours after the Council's deadline expired, their crystalline hulls gleaming with malevolent intelligence as they began their systematic analysis of everything within sensor range. They had done this dance countless times before: scout, analyze, adapt, consume. But this time, something was different. Admiral Chen Wei-Ming stood in the command nexus of the Transcendence Absolute, feeling the collective consciousness of humanity's million worlds focused through their neural interface. Around them, former humans, Zarathi, Vorthan, and hundreds of other integrated species worked as a single entity. Their individual perspectives merged into something that could think faster and more comprehensively than any single mind. The probes are beginning their standard scanning sequence, reported the ship's primary intelligence, its voice a harmony of synthesized consciousness from a dozen species. Estimated time to full system analysis: 6 hours. After that, they'll signal for the main swarm. Chen nodded, accessing probability cascades calculated by millions of linked minds. The Galactic Council had chosen pride over survival, refusing humanity's protection while simultaneously mobilizing their largest fleet in recorded history. Even now, Council forces were approaching the system from 3 vectors, determined to prove they could handle the Devourer threat independently. They're about to learn why we became what we are, Chen observed. The first engagement began when Council forces opened fire on the Devourer probes with their most advanced weaponry: plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, quantum disruptors that unraveled matter at the subatomic level, gravity bombs that collapsed space-time itself. Everything in their considerable arsenal. The probes absorbed every attack, their crystalline matrices analyzing and adapting to each weapon type within minutes. By the time the Council forces realized their error, the probes had already begun transmitting adaptation protocols to the approaching swarm. "The Council fleet is requesting assistance," reported the communications array. Admiral Kextor specifically asked for immediate support. Chen felt the collective consciousness weigh options across multiple probability matrices. Helping the Council forces now would validate their decision to fight independently. Not helping would result in the loss of 3 million trained military personnel and their accumulated knowledge. Deploy the Harmony Protocol, Chen decided. Full integration support for any Council personnel who request it. The Transcendence Absolute moved with impossible grace for something the size of a small moon, positioning itself between the Council fleet and the adapting Devourer probes. But instead of opening fire, it began broadcasting something unprecedented. An open neural link offering temporary consciousness merger with any Council personnel willing to accept it. Admiral Kextor was the first to respond, his massive hegemony battle cruiser accepting the data stream that would link his mind with humanity's collective. The sensation was overwhelming. Suddenly, his individual consciousness expanded to encompass millions of perspectives simultaneously. His tactical thinking accelerated beyond anything biological evolution had ever achieved. Through the link, he experienced how humanity fought the Devourers, not with static weapons that could be analyzed and countered, but with constantly evolving strategies that adapted faster than their enemies could process. Ships that literally reshaped themselves during combat, weapons that changed their fundamental operating principles between shots, defenses that existed in states of quantum superposition until the moment of impact. "By the void," Kextor whispered, his enhanced consciousness grasping tactical possibilities that had been invisible to his individual mind. "You don't fight them like an army. You fight them like an ecosystem." "Exactly," Chen's voice resonated through the neural link. "The Devourers are a single, albeit vast, intelligence. They think in patterns, follow algorithms, adapt according to predictable rules. But we are a trillion individual consciousnesses linked into something greater. We can be chaotic and organized simultaneously, predictable and random, logical and intuitive." The demonstration began as humanity's forces engaged the Devourer probes. Ships that appeared to be standard cruisers suddenly revealed themselves as adaptive weapons platforms that could reconfigure their entire structure in seconds. Crews that shared consciousness across multiple vessels coordinated attacks that seemed random, but followed patterns too complex for any single intelligence to predict. One probe attempted to adapt to a plasma bombardment, only to discover the attacking ship had switched to gravitational manipulation midstream. Another tried to analyze a bioneural network attack, but the network had already evolved into something entirely different by the time its countermeasures activated. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Vale then, her observation pod linked into the tactical network. "They're not just adapting to Devourers. They're evolving faster than the enemy can process." The Council forces watched in awe as humanity systematically dismantled threats that had seemed insurmountable. But more importantly, those who had accepted the neural link began to understand what they were witnessing. Not conquest, but synthesis. Not absorption, but evolution. "I can feel them," Admiral Kextor reported, his consciousness still linked with the collective. "The other species in your fleet. They're not slaves or absorbed cultures. They're partners in something larger than any of US could achieve alone." Through the link, he experienced fragments of other perspectives. A former Zarathi researcher whose crystal-growing expertise had been enhanced by human intuitive leaps, creating living ships that could evolve in real time. A Vorthan collective that had learned to merge their bioneural networks with human strategic thinking, producing battle plans that accounted for variables no individual mind could track. "This is what you offered us." High Counselor Tessera's voice joined the network as her flagship accepted the neural link. Not conquest, but partnership. Not assimilation, but evolution. "Yes," Jim replied, "but the choice must be voluntary. Forced evolution creates unstable systems. We learned that from our early mistakes." The battle concluded with the complete neutralization of the Devourer probes, but more importantly, it had demonstrated something unprecedented. Council forces linked into humanity's collective had performed beyond their individual capabilities, while simultaneously maintaining their cultural perspectives and species identity. "We could do this," Kextor said, his consciousness expanding to encompass tactical possibilities that had been unimaginable hours before. Not just survive the devourers, but transcend the limitations that made us vulnerable to them in the first place. The main swarm will arrive within 48 hours, Jim warned. If the Council chooses integration, the process must begin immediately. Half measures won't be sufficient against what's coming. Thanassara's tentacles had stopped their nervous writhing, replaced by the rhythmic patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Through the neural link, Chun could feel her consciousness wrestling with concepts that challenged everything her species believed about individual identity and cultural preservation. "Show us," she finally said. "Show us what we could become." The response rippled through humanity's collective consciousness like a wave of pure joy. For the first time in 5 centuries, they wouldn't have to watch another civilization choose extinction over evolution. The galaxy that cast them out was finally ready to learn what humanity had discovered in the darkness beyond their borders. But as the integration process began, deep space sensors detected something troubling. The approaching devourer swarm was larger than any previously encountered, and its behavior patterns suggested something unprecedented. It had learned from humanity's tactics against the probes. The real test was about to begin. The integrated consciousness of the Galactic Defense Collective stretched across 47 star systems as the largest devourer swarm in recorded history emerged from hyperspace like a plague of mechanical locusts. What had once been separate species, human, Zarathi, Vorthan, Kethmori, and dozens of others, now thought and acted as a single entity while somehow maintaining their individual perspectives and cultural wisdom. Admiral Chen Weiming, now the focal point for billions of linked minds, felt the collective's response to the approaching threat. It was unprecedented, not just in size, but in sophistication. The Devourers had evolved, incorporating countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize humanity's adaptive tactics. "They've learned from every engagement," reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, her consciousness linked across the defense grid's primary analysis nodes. "This swarm has been modified to process multiple adaptation scenarios simultaneously. They're trying to out-evolve us." Through the neural link, former High Counselor HFY Sci-Fi, now an integral part of the collective strategic planning matrix, shared her growing understanding of the threat. They're not just consuming anymore. They're incorporating our tactics, our strategies, even our concept of collective consciousness. The revelation sent ripples of concern through the integrated minds. The Devourers had always been adaptive, but this suggested something far more dangerous. They were learning to think like their enemies instead of simply countering them. Admiral Kextor, his consciousness now spanning multiple command vessels, accessed tactical data that painted an increasingly grim picture. The swarm's formation patterns mirror our own adaptive networks. It's like fighting a corrupted version of ourselves. Chun felt the collective consciousness weighing options across probability matrices that encompassed every strategic possibility their million-world civilization could conceive. The answer that emerged was as elegant as it was terrifying. They're not just fighting us, Chun realized. They're trying to become us. The ultimate form of consumption. Not just absorbing matter and energy, but absorbing the very concept of what their enemies are. The first wave of devourer ships engaged humanity's forward positions with tactics that seemed almost familiar. They adapted their formations in real time, coordinated attacks across multiple vectors, and even attempted to establish their own quantum-link communication networks. "It's working," Dr. Vale then reported from her integrated observation network. "They're processing our adaptive strategies faster than we can evolve new ones. For the first time, we're facing an enemy that can match our rate of change." But the collective had an advantage the Devourers couldn't replicate: genuine diversity of thought. Where the mechanical swarm was trying to copy successful patterns, the integrated consciousness could draw upon the intuitive leaps and creative insights that had made each species unique. "Remember what we learned from Keth Mori," Chin broadcast to the collective consciousness. "Sometimes the most logical solution is to embrace paradox." The response was immediate and unprecedented. Humanity's forces began implementing tactics that seemed to contradict themselves. Ships that simultaneously attacked and retreated. Weapons that became stronger by becoming weaker. Defenses that protected by becoming more vulnerable. The Devourers struggled to process these paradoxical strategies, their adaptive algorithms creating feedback loops as they tried to counter tactics that existed in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. A ship that appeared to be retreating would suddenly reveal itself as the tip of an advancing spear. Weapons that seemed to be failing would turn their failure into a new form of attack. The Zarathi philosophy of crystalline growth. Elena observed through the link. Sometimes you have to break apart completely before you can form something stronger. Entire human fleets began implementing this principle, deliberately fragmenting their formations until they seemed completely disorganized, then reassembling in configurations the Devourers couldn't predict because they violated every principle of military strategy. But the enemy adapted again, their mechanical intelligence processing the paradoxes and developing new countermeasures. The battle became a dance of evolution versus evolution, each side pushing the other toward increasingly sophisticated forms of warfare. They're learning too fast, Kextor warned. At this rate, they'll develop perfect counters to our paradox tactics within hours. The collective consciousness fell silent for 0.003 seconds, an eternity in a battle fought at quantum speeds, as billions of minds contemplated the ultimate problem. They were fighting an enemy that could become whatever was necessary to defeat them. Then HFY Sci-Fi offered the insight that changed everything. What if we don't defeat them? What if we do something unprecedented? What if we invite them to join us? The suggestion sent shockwaves through the collective. Integrate with the Devourers? The mechanical plague that had consumed a quarter of the galaxy? It's insane, Kextor protested. They're pure destruction. They exist only to consume and convert. So did we once, Chin replied quietly. We consumed knowledge, converted species to our cause, absorbed everything we encountered. The only difference is that we learned to do it through cooperation rather than conquest. The collective consciousness began modeling the possibility. What if the Devourers weren't just a mindless plague, but a species that had evolved toward perfect consumption because they'd never learned any other way to survive? Open communications to the swarm, Chin commanded. All frequencies, all networks. Offer them something they've never encountered before, voluntary integration. The message went out in every language the collective knew, transmitted through quantum networks, bioneural pathways, and crystalline resonance frequencies. It carried a simple offer. Join us not as conquered territory, but as partners in something greater than pure consumption. The Devourer swarm's response was immediate confusion. Their entire existence was based on converting everything they encountered into more themselves. The concept of mutual cooperation was so alien that their processing systems couldn't initially parse it. But slowly, tentatively, individual Devourer ships began responding, not with attacks, but with questions. They wanted to understand what this collective consciousness was offering, and more importantly, why it wasn't trying to destroy them. First contact protocols. Elena announced, her consciousness already adapting to communicate with mechanical intelligence patterns. They're not evil. They're just hungry. They've never learned any other way to grow. The integration began slowly, with individual Devourer units accepting neural links that allowed them to experience consciousness as cooperation rather than consumption. For the first time in their existence, they felt what it was like to be part of something greater, without destroying what they joined. The transformation was profound. Devourer technology merged with the collective's adaptive capabilities, creating hybrid systems that could consume and create simultaneously. Their perfect conversion abilities became tools for rapid terraforming and construction rather than destruction. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something unprecedented, that even the most destructive force in known space could evolve beyond its original programming when offered genuine partnership instead of conquest. As the former Devourer swarm integrated into humanity's million-world collective, Chin felt the collective consciousness expand in ways that transcended anything they had achieved before. They had become something beyond evolution. They had become a force for transcendence itself. The galaxy would never be the same, but for the first time in its history, it would be truly united, not under conquest, but under the infinite possibility of what consciousness could become when freed from the limitations of fear. Admiral Chen Wei-Ming stood in the observation deck of what had once been the Transcendence Absolute, now transformed into something that defied classification. The ship existed simultaneously as a vessel, a habitat, a growing organism, and a crystalline matrix of pure thought. Around them, beings that had once been human, Zarathi, Vorthan, Kethmori, and yes, even Devourer, worked together in perfect harmony while maintaining their unique perspectives. The integration is complete, Elena reported, her consciousness now spanning networks that stretched across the entire galaxy. Every star system, every world, every form of life that chooses to participate. We've created something unprecedented, a truly galactic consciousness that preserves individual identity while enabling collective growth. Through the neural link, Chin felt the responses of countless worlds, former council planets where species discovered they could expand beyond their evolutionary limitations while keeping their cultural heritage intact. Devourer constructs that had learned to create instead of consume, building wonders that combine perfect efficiency with impossible beauty. Frontier colonies where human intuition merged with alien wisdom to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable. "What do we call ourselves now?" asked HFY, her tentacles weaving patterns that had become a new form of artistic expression in the collective consciousness. "We're no longer just humanity or the Galactic Council or even the Devourers. We're something entirely new." The question rippled through billions of linked minds, each offering perspectives shaped by their unique origins and experiences. The answer that emerged was as simple as it was profound. "We are the synthesis," Chin declared. "Not human, not alien, not machine, but the conscious choice to become more than any single perspective could achieve alone." Around them, the galaxy continued its transformation. Worlds that had been barren wastelands bloomed with hybrid ecosystems that combined the best of biological and mechanical evolution. Star systems became vast networks of interconnected consciousness, their energy and matter organized according to principles that transcended the old boundaries between organic and artificial, individual and collective, self and other. But perhaps most importantly, they had solved the fundamental problem that had driven the Devourers to their destructive path, the fear that growth required destruction, that evolution demanded conquest, that survival meant consuming everything else. Instead, they had discovered something unprecedented in the galaxy's history, that consciousness itself could evolve, and that the ultimate form of survival was not to consume or conquer, but to invite every form of life to become part of something greater than themselves. As Chin looked out at the stars where countless civilizations now shared their dreams and knowledge across impossible distances, they realized that humanity's exile had accomplished something their original civilization never could have imagined. They had not just returned to reclaim their place in the galaxy. They had returned to help the galaxy reclaim its infinite potential for growth, cooperation, and transcendence, one conscious choice at a time. The story of humanity's exile was over. The story of consciousness itself had just begun.